Rebekah Wolf, who leads content design and strategy for Microsoft's Fluent Design System. We also have Michael Andrews, who is a content strategy evangelist at content.ai, which is this headless CMS platform, and Vanessa Schuller, who is a senior UX writer at Condé Nast with a focus on design systems. So, Michael, take it away.
Awesome. Thank you so much, Paula, Larry, and Ariel for organizing one of my favorite content meetups. So I'm going to actually share my screen if I can, and y'all should see my screen now. And we're calling this discussion continues. This discussion is probably going to overflow this time because we have a lot of content. We threw together a lot of slides that talk about us and what we're doing, and some thoughts that we have about content and design systems as of right now. So I'm going to try to keep going quickly with my part of it. Let's see. Yes, we have giveaways. Very excited that Giacomo Lasani is making a one ticket available for LavaCon. LavaCon is a great content strategy conference. A lot of Michael Andrews and myself, and I believe Paula, have presented there in the past. A lot of the topics that we're going to talk about today are topics that are covered in part and parcel of what they talk about in LavaCon. If you can make it there in October, it is a very fun and informative conference. So we are giving a ticket away for that. If you can be there in New Orleans, definitely put your name in and you can go. Also, we do have that exciting $100 gift certificate for the Condé Nast store. You can get New Yorker merchandise and, of course, Vogue merchandise. And is Natalie Marie Dunbar on the line? Did she make it tonight?
Oh, yeah, she's here. Sorry, let me find her and ask her to unmute. 1 second.
We're also giving away a copy of From Solo to Scale to Building a Sustainable Content Strategy Practice. And Natalie's going to sign it for the lucky winner. Yay! There she is right now.
There it is. Thanks, Michael.
Hey, Natalie. I know you're not working on a design system right now because you're doing so many other things, but really scaling content strategy is what design systems are all about to a certain extent. So I was wondering if you could talk to us a little bit about how you scale yourself and some quick lessons that we can take.
How I scale myself, well, starts with healthy boundaries and knowing what to say yes to and what to say later to. Definitely in the book writing process, that was really important. In terms of scaling, I can't talk a lot about specifics at my current company, but I will say that we have a pretty robust office hours. We are starting to spread our office hours across business units so that that those teams, design teams that don't have an embedded content designer, can still get some content design love. We are not in my purview, but in another of my colleagues' purviews, there is some work being done to start to integrate our content design best practices and such, and working with the team that owns the design system. So I'm here because, I wrote a book about scaling content strategy practices, but there are still things that I'm very hungry to learn and understand. And I'm always in that learning mindset. So I'm here not only to give this away, but also to listen in and learn and just be around like-minded folks that just keep my brain just going.
Awesome. Thank you for taking the time. I know you're super busy. If there's like one major lesson that you learned in writing this book, I know that was a major project. What would that be that you could share with us?
Actually, a couple of things come to mind. Number one, and I think that's evident here in this meetup group, especially because I know this has been especially throughout the pandemic, has been a lifeline for me. I think our community as practitioners, I always knew us to be generous, but in the writing process, in reaching out to people to ask for help, or can I use an image, or can you read this and tell me if it makes sense, or whatever. There's just such a generosity and a kindness. And I know you're like, what does it have to do with content strategy and content design? And it has to do with the main theme that runs throughout the book. And that is, you could probably take out the words content strategy, just building a sustainable practice. And a lot would still apply, because it's about building relationships. It's about, once you build those relationships and you have that common respect and understanding of what everyone brings to the table cross-functionally, then gaining alignment, and then keeping that alignment going as you're starting to scale. So when you're building your practice and you maybe are solo, or you have one or two people, and you're meeting with your other, sorry, my dog has an opinion about this. When you're meeting with, other cross-functional teammates, to try to understand, what do they know about the practice that we call content strategy or content design? What do they know about how we can help them? And then coming together and scaling together. Yes, the onus is on us as the content pros to get into the weeds of the work. But as we're building and scaling, then we're building and scaling with alignment with our other cross-functional partners. And I think that's crucial to a structure standing up. A structure such as a content strategy practice.
Awesome. What you're talking about is systems work too.
Yep.
There's a lot of parallelism in what we're going to talk about today. Any final words as we dig into some more system stuff?
I'm just really excited to be back here and listen to all of you share about this design system work, and because I know I'll be diving in myself soon enough. So take it away. Thank you.
Awesome. Thank you for showing up, Natalie. This is so exciting.
Absolutely. Thank you for having me.
All right. Now let's move on, and let's have Rebekah Wolf talk about some of the work that she's doing at Microsoft and the Fluent design system. Take it away, Rebekah.
Hi, everyone. So I lead the content design and strategy for the Fluent design system, and specifically for the extension of Fluent for the business applications group, which is the suite of products for Power Platform and Dynamics 365. And I also partner pretty closely with the core Fluent team to make sure that any content patterns that we create within our org are leveled up to the rest of Microsoft. And in addition to that, I work on the Microsoft Writing Style Guide through that editorial board, and the Cloud and AI Style Guides board, to make sure that there is a strong connection between our style guides and the design system itself. And then outside of that, I organize the Design Systems Content Club on Slack, which just spun up like 6 months ago or so. And it's for people who work on design systems from a content lens, so content strategy or content design. And that's been a really fun way to connect with other people around design system work. So my role at Microsoft spans a lot of areas of content. It's everything from helping develop a strategy and vision for design systems and our design systems team, to content strategy and information architecture for the systems, and then into like just content alignment, and bringing the patterns that we create for components into the design system itself, so that anybody who's referencing the design system can tap into those patterns. So the next slide shows kind of just a peek at what the toolkit that I work on looks like. It's a collection of patterns and experiences that are unique to our group of products. And then we also develop guidance for fluent components and patterns and work really closely to create a pipeline between our team and the core Fluent team. In the next slide, I took a kind of a snippet of what that content guidance might look like in our toolkit for a specific component. This is the Toast content guidance. For all of our components, I take like an example component with real content in it and call out the different content elements and what the main guidance is for each of those elements. And then I create a link between the guidance in our design system and the style guides whenever I go deeper into the guidance. On the next page, this is another area I work on. It's kind of hard to see with this image, but decision trees for when to use which type of component. I work really closely with interaction designers to make sure that we are steering the design system users to the right components and patterns so that everybody is using the components in the right way. This, along with guidance, I think is like really key to a design system working properly, like making sure the components that we have available for people are being used in a cohesive way across all of our products. And then this is another type of decision tree, also kind of hard to see, but it's a decision tree for when to use what type of content. And specifically in this case, it's for when to use placeholder text, helper text, or an info icon with a call out. And it has more information on things to just be aware of with each type of content element and real example content in those components, so people can have something contextual to ground it in. The other thing I wanted to showcase is this is kind of what really got me interested in design system work, was seeing misalignment across our products in very basic components. And one of these areas is the dialogue component. And I took examples from different products across Microsoft of dialogues and how the content is used in these different dialogues and redundancies that we were finding, and how the buttons and the title weren't exactly in sync with each other, which could create some confusion for the user. And whenever I would work with a PM or an engineer on this, it was like, well, the component was built this way, and we have to have we have to have body text along with the title. We have to have the button order this way. And I just was thinking, well, we really need to figure out a better way to build these components so that they work with the content that goes inside of them instead of the other way around. So I worked with my team to create a new dialogue component where the body content is optional. So this component can flex to fit what kind of content it needs. And then created some guidance around the different content elements. And you would think a dialogue should be pretty straightforward, but having clear guidance for a component this simple can create a lot of clarity and alignment across our products. So with the last slide, I just wanted to show kind of a before and after of what the dialogue component looks like before content guidance and after content guidance. In the before, you have the redundancy, and the after it's much more simplified and clear and can keep the user moving in the right direction.
Awesome. Thank you so much, Rebekah. Just so you know, I'm stealing your decision trees. Those are priceless. Very valuable way of helping people know when the content goes where, and guidance for how to do it. But now let's talk with Vanessa, and she's going to talk about working on design systems at Condé Nast.
Thank you so much. Michael, can you also do me a quick favor and refresh the slides? I think there should be a little bit more information on here.
Oh, okay. Let me do that. Let me see how I can do that.
Okay.
1 second. I'm gonna have to.
Yep, there we go. So if you just go back and then share it again, it should pop up. Not sure why that happened.
Show.
Thank you. Awesome.
No problem.
Sorry for that slight delay, everyone. My name is Vanessa Schuller, and I'm a senior UX writer at Condé Nast. However, my title is being changed along with my whole team's very soon to be senior content designers to better reflect the full scope of the work that we've been doing. In addition to my work at Condé Nast on our design system and our subscription and commerce platforms, I also am launching UX for the People, which is a nonprofit like pro bono UX work collective, mainly partnering with local city and state governments to help regular citizens better access the benefits through better UX. Launching that this winter with a friend of mine who is at Meta. And then my website is linked below if you'd like to check out some of my past work. So at Condé Nast, we have many competing stakeholders and many competing motivations, much more so I would say than a typical tech company, because right now Condé Nast is both a tech and a media company trying to learn how to bridge those two different viewpoints. So in my work in design systems, the main things that we are trying to balance is the need for editorial excellence. So speed of publishing, aesthetic excellence, maintaining a strong point of view and tone for all of our different publications, as well as the need for strong developmental integrity so that our developers and our designers can quickly move and execute without breaking things in the process. As I said, some of those key considerations when we're trying to balance those different challenges. So at Condé Nast, we're often reporting on the latest news. If you think about something like the Met Gala for Vogue, we need a website that can support live to-the-minute updates on that, video updates, picture updates, link those different pages, and all of that needs to be built into the design system so that it can be replicated every year for this event. In addition to that, we often have breaking stories. So we have reporters working on internal systems who aren't as familiar with the tech side of it, and maybe there isn't someone having eyes on a story before it goes live. So we need well thought out, well-functioning internal systems to guarantee that the development is going to be valid for those new stories. Additionally, we also have universal applications. So across our many brands, which I have listed on the next slide, we need to be able to use the same components and the same development tracks across all of those different brands to maximize that speed and maximize our development integrity. Additionally, across all of the brands, those brands also have sub-markets and sub-brands within all of those different almost headlines. So we're not just looking at how do we best design for Vogue, we're looking at how do we best design for Vogue US, Vogue UK, Vogue France, Vogue Italia, Vogue Dubai. The list goes on and on. So how do we localize our content? How do we make sure that users can connect with us across all of those different cultural expectations, even down to the ways that they read on a screen or what different signage means across different cultures so that they can most easily access the content that they'd like to find. In addition to that, we are really strongly led by an editorial team that believes in leading culture, not just reporting it. So there's the constant push to innovate and make our site a tech leader, not just a follower, so that we can be a hub for information in the information age. As I said, this will give you an idea of many of our brands. Forgive me, I don't think I could even list all of them. But as you can see, Teen Vogue, The New Yorker, Wired, Vanity Fair, Bon Appetit, it's many household names, but it's across many different disciplines. So we need to make a design system that functions just as well for a fashionista reading Vogue as for a foodie reading Bon Appetit, and those very different user cross sections that use our site. To give you guys a little insight, I thought I would pull out a specific example. So one thing that I was emphasizing was the need to have like universal components. So to give you an idea, on the left-hand side, there's the Vogue website, and then underneath it, there's a little screenshot from Vogue Runway, which is a particular part of the website where you can go for up-to-date, I believe it's daily updated during Fashion Week, with all the different designer collections and all the latest photography to come out of it. So there you can see Marc Jacobs Fall 2022 ready to wear. That is a carousel component so that you can scroll through where it says look 1 through 42 and see all of the different like fashion that Marc Jacobs has presented. On the other hand, there's the New Yorker page, very, very different brand, very different readership. Underneath it, you can see the beloved cartoons, but if you look, it is actually the same component so that you can scroll cartoons the same way you can scroll through the fashion show. And we need to be able to build those components and track them and organize them in our design system so that a designer on the fly can apply them to any brand, which is these two as examples. My current large project that I'll be talking a bit about today is migrating our design system from being an internal to an external resource that can be used. So this is just a little screenshot that I pulled of our internal. It's a little disorganized. I did not help create the current iteration. It was before my time at the company, but it spans a few different internal systems. And this I pulled because it's one internal system, a page telling you how to create something on the other internal system and how unintuitive that is. But if you then click, we are migrating that all to the same system. So Michael, if you want to go to the next slide. I actually, no one tell my team lead, but I shared a little screenshot with you all. This is not going to be launching until this September, but here is a little sneak peek of the new Condé Nast public-facing storefront. So much like other companies like Zendesk or I believe Microsoft as well, we are hoping that our knowledge in the design system space can benefit others so that they can explore how we have balanced all these varying viewpoints to create content and brand expression organization that can hopefully help other companies as well as ours.
Well, thank you so much, Vanessa. And thank you for that sneak peek. That's so exciting. We, the design system community loves sharing these resources, and we look forward to seeing yours. Michael Andrews, there's a lot of Michaels in this meetup. You're Michael A for now on. I'm Michael HV. But definitely tell us what you're doing in your new job at content.ai.
Oh, thank you, Michael HV. So I am content strategy evangelist at content.ai, which is a modular content platform. You might think of it as a headless content management system. And I come to this discussion sort of from a different perspective. I know a lot of people get interested in UX as writers, and I sort of am a reverse commuter. I started in UX and got interested in content. And I think content is just endlessly fascinating because it's quite complex. So I, though, am very interested in the intersection between content and interaction design. And that's one of the reasons why I think a lot about how we can think about systems to manage what it is that we're doing. So if you move to the next slide, what I want to talk about is design systems and how they relate to concept of modular content. And maybe some of you are familiar with the idea of a content model. And a content model is a way of structuring content and making content modular. And that's really the thing that I'm thinking a lot about, because the people I work with, basically our customers, are trying to manage large amounts of content and thinking about presenting it in many different ways, just as we were hearing about presenting it, content across different brands or different channels, and how can you work with this content together with a design system. So the next slide, if we think about where we are, this is just my personal perspective, and other people may have a different point of view, but I think about the tasks that we work on, and people who work as content designers have certain tasks that they're doing in the context of a larger UX team. And UX teams are kind of starting to think about reusing UI components. That's really one of the big benefits of working with the design system, is you have some UI components defined and you're able to reuse them. But the work of content designers, the folks who are actually writing text, for example, tends to be a little bit more manual and intensive. So they have to screen by screen think about what it is that they need to say to be presented on each screen. When you have that situation, the folks who are doing the UI design, they can kind of execute things pretty quickly. They have some, design tokens there. They have their UI components defined, and they're able to kind of reuse this stuff and implement it pretty quickly. Whereas our design systems often require a lot of interpretation. We have to read through a lot of text and sort of figure out how that applies to our specific situation. We may need to do some additional user research to figure out what content needs to be there. And I think there's this sort of disparity between where the folks who are doing the straight sort of visual UI design are and where the people writing content are. So the UI design's becoming much more modular. I'm not saying it's completely modular. I mean, they still have a lot of things they have to do and decide themselves, but the content yet really isn't as modular as it maybe could be. So what I see is we have a lot of design systems, and these are just a couple of examples where you define components and it's not really clear what content goes in those components. I mean, the components are very versatile. They can accept a lot of different kinds of content. It shows a lot of layout there. We have a sense of how content would be presented, but we don't know specifically what information belongs in those content. And that's not always true. We've already seen some examples, some wonderful examples, where that is not true. People have mapped out these, very good decision trees and things like that. But just looking across, design systems as a whole, this tends to be very common, just to have these very generic boxes that can accept content from anywhere. We don't know if that's something someone's written or whether a system is generating this content or if it's user-generated content. We don't know where the content's coming from and exactly what it is. So what I want to suggest to you is, since we're talking about content guidance, I want to suggest to you that maybe there's different kinds of content guidance. And design systems are certainly a very important kind of content guidance, but maybe they don't cover everything that we need to think about. And one of the things that we can do is think about a role of a content model in products. And I work for a product company just like many of you do. And I think content models have a very important role to play. And it's a different role than a design system. So a content model really is about specifying what information and messages we need to present, getting very specific about that, to the point of saying, what is mandatory, what's optional, what kind of values we need here, default values or predefined values, or what's allowed, and these sort of parameters, how many characters are allowed here, or how many words, because we have defined limits that we can work with, and that's what a content model can do. A design system, in contrast, really is more about how you present information and messages. So a lot of us around the UI containers, the styling of them, the behavior of them, the layout of them, and then, of course, the words. And words themselves have stylistic aspects to them, the terminology and the phrasing and the formatting of the words and all that kind of stuff, which is very, very important, but it's not about the specific information that needs to be presented in a very specific context. So next slide. And so really, I'm trying to encourage people to think about the structure of the content that is presented in the UI. And all this content, whether it's before someone takes an action, while they're taking an action, after they take an action, can kind of be broken down and really parsed out in a structural way. And we can think about the options that a user has, the statuses that they're seeing, the instructions that they need to see, explanations, the kinds of actions that they need to see. So like the actions is a good example. We often get caught up in this sort of UI terminology about buttons. Is it a primary button? Is it a secondary button? But really it's about the action. And is it a primary CTA, or is it an alternate CTA, or is it a next action? It doesn't matter whether it's a button or not. It's about what do they need to do? And, should it be a button? Should it be a link? I don't know, but we need to have this flexibility to have a content first approach where we can decide what it is we want to communicate to people to help them complete their task. And then we figure out how to present that in a browser. So finally, my last slide here is thinking about what I'm calling decoupling the content from the UI design. And this is actually an approach that's starting to get a lot of traction across enterprises where instead of making the content that we create sort of captive to our UI design, we're separating them. So we think about the specific messages and information that we need to present. And then we think about the different ways it can be presented in different channels, in different possibilities, different combinations. And, we take that sort of center part there, that's our the content that we're modeling there, and then we have different opportunities to present it. And you can present this, it's done through APIs and other ways if you're interested in the technical possibilities of it, but you're managing this. And really the content people can kind of take back control where they're not relying on the people doing the UI development to decide how it is that this stuff is being done. So that's my piece, and just happy to share it with you there. And on to you, Michael.
Thank you, Michael. That is awesome. And thanks for the buttons example. You're going to see another one because it's a good, reliable example of what content strategy and content design can bring to a design system. And it's I love your continuing work on decoupling content and UI, and love that there's practice, that there's progress on that. I'm Michael Haggerty-Villa. I'm the Senior Product Design Manager at Compass. And I have, over the past 5 years or so, been doing some research on, the status of content in design systems. And we're making some progress. I've actually published some of this research in Content Science Review. We're making some progress, but I'm finding that most design systems actually still don't have content in them as a practice. They have default content by what was created by the engineers or the designers, but they may not have content represented in the design system as a practice. So I actually audited a number of sites, and I was auditing for these 5 values. And my inspiration for these attributes that was actually Paula Land's book on inventories and audits. Thank you, Paula. So I wanted to see if content was present at all in the design systems. And as you could see, the gold bar actually is the more current research number. We're still below 50%. That's as of, about today. Is the style guide present at all? About 35% of the surveyed design systems have style guides. Even less have voice, which is a little bit surprising because voice is actually represented not just in content, but also in visual design and interaction design and animation. And that it's, how is that voice of the product being expressed? Also, is there real copy? This was the biggest surprise in my most recent survey. More sites than ever are actually shying away from lorem ipsum and starting to use real copy and realizing that real copy, real use cases are the better tests for components and patterns. And also, were there content patterns themselves? This is still a stretch goal. A content pattern is, how do I do a help article? How do I do an error message? Those content pieces that we have to do over and over again, are there patterns for those? We're almost at 20%, but we're still making progress. The Compass design system tries to do all of these. We actually launched in February. This is actually behind a firewall. So everything I'm showing you is special for this evening, just as that glimpse of the Verso design system is special. This gives you an idea. It's pretty typical organization of a design system, but we made sure that content is front and center and is actually featured prominently in the navigation. And once people get there, they realize there's actually a lot of content about content. Our style guide is baked in there. Our voice and tone guide is there as well as, how to talk to us, how to engage in office hours, how to talk to the design system to get more information and more content support. We went really deep. Actually, my associate Anne Regan went really deep in help documentation, and she, Michael A, is also one of our largest consumers and users of our headless CMS. Frequently, help documentation can benefit from a headless CMS in very powerful ways, and she's actually leading the way on that. But also, she has some excellent guidance on how to write help documentation because her content team is very small. She can't be the only one doing that work. So, how does she share her knowledge with the rest of the organization? Even going so far as to do things that, a lot of people in the content community think facts. Oh, yeah, facts show up when the product totally fails. But actually, this is a great document that Anne put together because she shows, yes, there are these problems with facts, but sometimes they are a necessary part of the experience. How do we do it right so that it actually helps the user? And here's my button example. Michael, we do have content guidelines actually throughout the design system on an individual component level, including on buttons. But also I want to share with you and just sort of look at the architecture of this page. All of these decisions were made by content with engineers, with designers, including the right rail that you see, which is the page level navigation. It sort of comes out of the box if you're using the publishing tool that we're using. But once we realized that was part of Zero Height, we realized, how do we use that well? How do we make sure that we can organize the content and take advantage of that functionality? Actually, using Zero Height enabled us to launch 4 months ahead of time. It is not as customized a presentation, but content did participate in a lot of that development. Including farther down, once you scroll down that massive page about all things buttons, you actually get to things like the accessibility guidelines and the content guidelines, and including entry parts into more parts of the content design guidelines. And that's what I have to share directly from the Compass design system, but also content has a lot to offer design systems. I've shared this word dump list a few times, but these are things that the content strategy and content design community know and can contribute to design systems. If content is only at about 45% of some of these design systems, some of these things that can really help the content and design and engineering communities, some of these things are absent from a lot of the design systems. So we have work to do and we have a lot to offer. And now, questions? We had a lot of questions come in from some posting of a survey online. So Larry, do you want to dive into some of those?
Yeah, we'll just take these in order. These are the order they came in. First question is, what's something about design systems you've changed your mind about or realized, either from working more closely with design systems or from the industry changing?
I have a quick answer.
Yeah.
I realized that, I thought that the writers had to write all the documentation. About 5 years ago, when I worked on the eBay design system, I'm like, let the writer do it. But then I realized the engineers were writing excellent documentation for themselves, and it was serving the engineers' needs perfectly. And it may not have been punctuated with the level of precision that I might apply, but it was really meeting the user's needs. So I started to let go the words and sort of establish processes for documentation so that the documentation could happen faster and the content person does not have to be the bottleneck.
I love that. And I'll plus one to that. Yeah, when I first started, I was like trying to reverse engineer how the components work because the documentation didn't exist. And so I was having to like ping the designers who were in charge of building or designing the component and the engineer who built the component to figure out what the interaction and behavior and all of that guidance was. And then finally I was like, okay, as this component is being designed and built, the designers and engineers need to document anything about the component. And then later someone can come through and edit that for clarity and make it a bit more structured and easy to read. The other thing that I've learned, and it's related to the documentation, is that documentation really is the key to design alignment. We put so much emphasis in design systems on the visual design itself and like what a button looks like, what the corner radius of a button is, what sort of font to use, that sort of thing. But really, if we want to have cohesive experiences in our products, we have to have clear documentation on how to use those components and create patterns with those smaller components. So that's been my biggest realization over the years.
And did Michael A. or Vanessa, did either of you have anything you wanted to add to that? Or
I would say on a very practical note, one trick that I learned this summer while working on our new storefront is that technical writers can be used to do documentation, like freelance technical writers, even if they're not super familiar with your system. So if you ever have a chance to utilize freelancers, sometimes letting them into your process can save you time, even if it's a little nerve-wracking.
I just have to interject that somebody just put in the chat, hey, she's answering my questions. I was typing it. So thank you. Michael A., did you have something you wanted to say? Or?
Oh, just, I guess the thing that surprised me is that in a lot of ways, design systems have come so far and we see them and there's a lot of material in them and they can look very, very polished. And a lot of people I work with, they say, hey, look at our design system. How does this work with the content? And they're surprised that they really haven't yet addressed so many areas about how it works with the content. So, the design systems have been led by the needs of front-end developers and trying to specify the appearance and behavior of components. But there's been tremendous work that's been done there, but it can lead to a false sense of completion, that people don't realize how much still is potentially missing from their design system, or what in fact their design system isn't really prepared to address, because there are other things that need to be addressed through other systems. So that's what I've learned.
Cool. Thanks, all. And I think we kind of hit on some of this next question already, but I'm going to ask still to get it out explicitly. The next question is, what can I do to expand my knowledge on design systems? Where does content belong in design systems? Those are kind of two questions in one. Has anyone written a book on content in design systems yet?
I'll put in a link to my article from Content Science Review. There's an article and there's a follow-up as well. There are handbooks. I really recommend following people on Twitter who do this sort of thing. I really recommend following Amy Hupe in the UK. I actually wanted her to participate in this. She's amazing, but it's about 2 a.m. in the UK right now. So I decided that she should sleep. So if you want to follow her, she's actually really active in the space. And meanwhile, let me find that link. Does anyone have any other resources that they know off the top of their heads?
Yeah, I would say, well, anybody is welcome to join the Design Systems Content Club, where there's so many people in that group that have a lot of really interesting approaches to design system work. And everybody in the group is really willing to share knowledge around that. I would also say, if you have a design systems team at your company, which I know it's becoming more and more of a thing, see if you can volunteer to start building out components with interaction designers and visual designers and engineers, because that's really the best way. I mean, I think doing that work is the best way to learn. And they definitely need to be partnering with content designers.
And did anybody else want to chime in on that one, or let's go ahead and go to the next question. Who from a dev side do you partner with or suggest folks to hire to make sure a design system works with other tools like Adobe Experience Manager? And there's a follow-on question. How do you get stakeholders to balance what's good dev with what's a good authoring experience? It's kind of about content management systems, it sounds like.
Well, okay, I think it's touching on an important issue, is that to some extent these tools are not really synchronized as much as they could be. It doesn't need to be that way, but people are just kind of working on their specific priorities, and so a lot of times the design systems are not necessarily connected with the content management systems, for example. And what I see is that if you have a developer-led process, a lot of times the content gets hard-coded into the deployed product. So that button text just gets wrapped around some HTML button tags, and once that's done, it gets to be very, very difficult to revise it if you decide later on that you want to change that button text. And that's a big pain point for people who work in content, that they don't don't have that control. They're very dependent on developers to make changes after a certain point in time. So it is really important to, I believe, as I said earlier, to decouple that sort of front end deployment from how the content itself is being managed. And there are ways to do that, but it's still something that many teams are kind of learning to understand how to do it. But as a simple matter, if you were working on a project that, say, was developing what would be called a progressive web application, I don't mean to throw jargon at people, but I mean, this is a common way that people deploy things. You can separate that content from that visual front end and maintain that separation, so it's easier to revise the content when you need to without kind of messing up that front end design.
There's an excellent marketing design system within Intuit. It's not part of their public-facing design system. And there's just a really close collaboration between design and engineering. And at one point, it was an Adobe Experience Manager project. I don't believe it is anymore. They work together to transition to another platform. But they just made sure that they had a strong team, a product manager, a designer, a content strategist, people that could all really work together and work closely together. And at the time when I was there, this was pre-COVID, they actually worked physically together as well. And so that really helped with that collaboration.
Cool. Did anybody else? Okay, if not, let's move on to the next question. What is the one metaphor or concept you use to help UX, UI designers understand modular or structured content? How do you help them see how it can be engineered just like components and design tokens?
Michael A. should lead this.
No, I think it's a great question, because I mean, I passionately believe that the UI design is getting more modular, and our content can be modular as well. And I don't know about the metaphor, but let's just look at how design systems have come into being. I think that from what I see, design systems came into being because as we were seeing from the example at Microsoft with I believe the dialogue boxes. I mean, you have these different styles of dialogue boxes that emerge across an organization. And it's very easy to see these things happen, and they stick out at you. It's like, wait a minute, why do these things look different? I mean, shouldn't there be some consistency here? So a design system really is a way to begin to approach the problem of having this variation across products when there shouldn't be variation, and this sort of variation that serves no purpose. It's just there because you have siloed teams working to solve the same problem in different ways. And that's the same problem we have with our content. So we need to think about the way our content maybe manifests itself across different products. And maybe the enterprise needs to take more charge of consistency for how they communicate in different products. Now, obviously, products are going to vary in terms of what you need to say and communicate, but some things are going to be fairly consistent. If you have a common way that you deal with accounts or just generally talk to customers about some sort of procedural problem, that's going to be something you want to be consistent with how you do. So there's an opportunity there to structure that content where whatever product it relates to is going to be done in a consistent way.
I'm hoping both Rebekah and Vanessa have things to say on this one.
Yeah, I was just going to chime in and say that I think it's also about efficiency for everyone. I think that's like the biggest problem that design systems are trying to solve. In addition to the consistency part, it's just helping people be as efficient as possible in their work so that they can spend more time tackling bigger problems in their products. So if we can create efficiency through these, through some of these components, then I think that is like a huge selling point for engineers and designers, and especially for people higher up the ladder who are in control of budgets. So yeah, I think it's worth making that pitch to people.
Yeah, Rebekah took the words right out of my mouth, just emphasizing efficiency across the board.
Great. Next question. Any tips for creating a governance mechanism for content in design systems, like when to publish, update, sunset, those kinds of questions? Are people building governance into their content parts of their systems?
Yeah, I can actually speak to this because we have just been considering that at Condé for the new site. One approach that we are thinking about taking, I can't speak to finished, there's no finalized like go-to on this yet, but I think that we're actually going to be looking at mode reports on the different pages. So examining the user data for how often our page is being used, and then also like how many users after reading through the page, are they staying on the page for long enough? And then are they immediately searching other terms, just trying to identify those patterns for users landing on a page and not having the right information. So using website data is one approach we're considering.
Any of the other panelists? Vanessa, I would love to do one follow-up to what you just said. You mentioned measuring like page performance. Do you ever try to measure, to the extent that your content is modularized or componentized, do you try to measure that independent of page level presentation? Or do any of you do?
So that's rough because we actually use a custom Figma plugin that we developed. I don't think anyone does, but I wish that we had that capability. I really do. That's a cool thing that I might actually bring up now that you flagged it.
That's why I asked, because everybody says the same thing. So I'm just fishing. Sorry. Let's see. Let's go to the next. Or did anybody else want to answer that question before we move?
We've inventoried everything, and we actually keep track of that inventory. Thank you, Paula. I'm plugging your book again inadvertently. And one of the attributes that we have is the publish date, because we want to actually make sure that we're making sure that the entire design system, including the content about it, is refreshed. So if we published that buttons page on December 17th, the next December 17th, we're going to look at it and make sure it's still current, make sure, and also we're able to work with our engineers just to actually see how it is actually being used throughout the repos, or if it is used, and it helps us track the health of the overall system as well as the content about it.
Cool. Next question, how do we ensure writing guidelines and design systems are useful and usable to different stakeholders, like content designers, UX writers, UX designers, engineers, all the different people who might use the guidelines?
Vanessa?
Someone else take that quick and let me collate my thoughts, please. I have a lot.
I can just say from our end, we do user testing on our design system. Pretty much, we've done it pretty much every year for the last 4 years. And it coincides with any toolkit updates that we're doing. And we walk different users from different disciplines through the design system and see if they're able to find different parts of the guidance and what they find useful, what they don't find helpful, what we can get rid of, that sort of thing. And that we have so many teams who are working without content designers. So I know that based on the feedback, it's been really helpful to have that baked into our design system so that there's less guessing from engineers and designers working without content design.
Yeah, to kind of jump off of that, we also do internal testing for any like new major updates. We actually just did a bunch this summer, which is why I said I had many thoughts. We did about 2 months of it with me actually leading the user testing. And one very interesting thing that we found that I spoke a little bit about at the last meetup that we all had was that internal users create their own like shortcuts throughout the design system, and they kind of fill in sections that they don't know, and then they use those shortcuts to almost like hack the system. So it's interesting. One thing to keep in mind, and just kind of like tack on to what Rebekah said, that I actually learned from our internal UX researcher, is that whenever you're conducting research on internal users, to take what they say with a grain of salt. There's this old writer's advice that they give to like authors, saying that if multiple people tell you that a part of your book has something wrong, don't listen to how they tell you to fix it, but change something about that section. And you can apply that as well to your content design systems. Just because others have proposed solutions doesn't mean that it's the best solution. It might just be the one that they have found while working in it.
I guess I love that, Vanessa. Yeah, anyhow, next question. I'm wondering what is key to achieving adoption, whether it's a content design system that lives on the component level, for example, in Figma, or if it's hosted in an independent document. Mostly about adoption, like how do you get people to use this stuff?
Adoption is an ongoing process for every design system. It needs to include content and everyone else. There's a number of processes such as office hours, which encourage people to come in, bring their design in flight and see how they can or should be applying the design system. And it's for adoption of, like in the content system, we see that a lot with what Anne Regan is doing in the Help Center, where she actually does coaching for the team that she does have. And she's provided guidelines for them. How does she make sure that it gets used? That's just sort of ongoing effort of, continuing to train, educate people, have Slack conversations, keep the design system in the design conversations that go on in the company.
Yeah, I think education is key in evangelizing that this information exists, because sometimes that's, especially with people who are new to your company, they just don't know what's already out there for them. And so just keep having those conversations in as many forums as possible, so people are aware that information is out there and it's ready for them to use. And that, and also for us, like we've started to put a lot of our documentation in Figma so that we're meeting designers where they're working. So they're not having to go back and forth between a site and a Figma file. But and also user testing. I think that's also a good way to see if people are aware of what is in the system itself.
Anybody else on that one? Let's see. The next question is.
I have a quick addition to that letter.
Yeah.
One of the things, it's sort of related to the user testing. If it's possible to do co-creation sessions with members of your design team, let's say you're working on a component or a new pattern, be sure to find out all the use cases or enough of the use cases throughout your product, and see if the people who will need to be using those can help you form and shape that component or pattern. They're much more likely to use it because they helped make it. So if that's something that can actually be used to help adoption as well.
Nice. I love that. That's a great adoption hack. Like get their buy-in ahead of time. Here's the next question is, what was the breakthrough moment for your organization when they realized a design system is more than a style guide and that content systems could play an integral part? So any like aha breakthrough moments
I came to the Compass design system because they had almost no documentation. So beautiful code. The code base was gorgeous, well developed across all platforms, web and mobile. And the Figma files were beautiful too, but people weren't really using it because they didn't have any guidelines for how to. So we quickly put up documentation that guided people to use it, and all of a sudden, voila, there was a change in the organization. And then the content guidelines, which were always planned at the beginning, the content design team came on board, and they've been, making huge changes even since that January, February launch. It's actually just finally being able to have a place to see it, even though engineers may be in Storybook and designers may be in Figma, there's still that other resource that helps encourage this conversation about the system.
Vanessa, I thought I saw your head nodding.
Yeah, quick story to chime in. I was not at Conde, so I can't speak to if this is exactly true. It's just kind of the lore that I heard about why the design system is so important, that there was once a demo day where designers for 2 different teams went to demo the same update for the site. And that was a key moment where they were like, okay, we need a design system, because they had spent a month working on it.
All right. Okay, let's go to the next question. This is a question about how to approach and make a case to the designers to add content design as part of the design system. Like, do you have to sell this to designers to incorporate content in the design system?
I haven't personally had to make that case to designers. I kind of just, I just inject myself into the process. There's still a design that's happening at the design on the design system that doesn't have content design support, and that's mostly because I don't have anyone else really helping me design these components from the content lens. But I would just if I were in this position where I had to really make a case for it, I would probably show some examples of what these components look like without any content design or content guidance to go along with them, and see what they look like in the products in different scenarios and the inconsistencies. I think that's like the quickest way to show what a content system can do. And also show an after, like what this looks like with content design and what it looks like without.
Yes. Either of the Michaels or Vanessa have anything for them?
Well, I think we're seeing some examples this evening of very, much more mature design systems. But if you do look across, the wider body of design systems, oftentimes the amount of content, as Michael H.B. has alluded to, is not as robust as it could be. So, clearly it's not a given that everyone developing a design system immediately sees the value of incorporating content in them. I think the other challenge really is that the content that shows up in design systems is often sort of to the side. There's sort of a style guide that's sort of a link that's separate from the UI component. So it's not really always directly integrated in with the UI components. And I know it's possible to do that, but it's just not always the case that it's there. So there is still a lot of work to be done. And if you are in a situation where you're working on a team and you don't have a lot of traction with putting content into your design system. I wouldn't feel discouraged. It takes a lot of time to get that to happen.
Yeah, Michael is right. It really depends on the maturity of the design org and the maturity of the design system. I mean, if you have a scrappy design system, which is one engineer and one visual designer, they're just perhaps not ready for content design. They don't realize that content design can help them, but they may be running so fast that they haven't even thought of it. But partnering with them where they are is the way to go. If you realize, hey guys, let's meet and see where we can start. With a very young system, that's the way to go. If it's a more mature system and that is predominantly visual led or led by product or interaction designers, I think you can often make the case of have we acid tested some of these components with real content, real use cases? If not, hey, maybe I can try to show that for you. Just partnering with the designers, engineers, wherever they are.
I want to move now to some of the questions in the chat. There's a bunch of them. I don't know that we'll get to all of them. We've got about 15 more minutes, but let's do what we can. This is a question. I think this goes back to Rebekah when you were talking about showing your decision diagrams. Mary had asked, how did you come by these decisions? Was it committee or was there a sole decision maker? How did those decision trees come to be?
Yeah, for the decision trees, trying to think back to how we developed them. One example is with the which type of notification to use. That was developed by a team of designers who were working on notification components and patterns. And we saw that there was a need to help designers and engineers try to understand which notification type to use, because we wanted them to be used in a consistent way. So I teamed up with a couple of the designers to develop that decision tree, and then we scaled it to Fluent. So I worked with a visual and interaction designer to develop it to be used more broadly. And then we presented that in a show and tell session that's for all Microsoft designers to get feedback. And we also leave our Figma files open to comment. So, and we encourage people to comment on those files. And I think the more people poke at these things, the better, because we want to get it right. For the placeholder text versus helper text, that was when I was working on a forms pattern and realizing that there was a need to help people figure out when to use what kind of placeholder or helper text or info icons, because they're all kind of being used in different ways and sometimes not or a lot of times not in the same way. And it affects the interaction, it affects the user experience. So I put that decision tree together and then shared it with a pretty large group of content designers to get their feedback, as well as visual and interaction designers. And I also worked with an accessibility expert to make sure that we were meeting accessibility standards with that too. So yeah, just getting as much feedback from as many people as possible, I think is the way to go with all of this stuff.
Well, next question is from Karen asks, I love this question. What is the primary key that you use to connect content modules or patterns with UX and UI design patterns? Is it user intent, need, or something else? Like, how do you connect up the content and the design elements?
A number of design elements exist specifically for content. Cards, containers, info bubbles. These are content presentations. So that content should have a place there. There needs to be an awareness of that specific use case and that specific, relatively specific content to make sure that component or pattern works. So that's when the purpose is clearly delivery of content, obviously content design can play a big role.
Michael, you were going to say something?
Yeah, just I think it's a great question. The way I think of it is, intent is very important. What is the user is trying to accomplish, and they could accomplish it multiple ways. So, in principle, at least, I mean, you could have some content that could be presented in a visual UI or in a non-visual UI. And I know most of us deal with visual UIs, and we're thinking about very specific renderings in a visual UI. But that's really where the intent comes in. It's like, okay, what is the person trying to achieve? What specific information and messages do they need to be able to access in order to achieve their goals? And that's how I would link those together.
Next question is from Susan. Do you work with a UX writer to come up with dialogue or things like word choice for buttons? I guess the interaction between the content folks and the design folks on coming up with that copy for things like buttons. How does that collaboration happen for any of you?
So if they're speaking to like the example content that we put in the component guidance, or the content guidance itself for like how to write a button label or a dialogue, I always make sure to vet any guidance that I come up with and any examples that I come up with a team of content designers to make sure that what I'm putting in the design system is actually useful to them. And then it's once it's in the design system, I mean, they can take that component and put whatever content they want into it, depending on what their scenario is. But yeah, just making sure it goes back to like that vetting process and getting plenty of feedback.
We try to have the content designers work with us also to develop do and don't examples. Everyone likes to do the don't examples, those things that you would never do, but making sure that the do example that goes with it is truly instructive. That's a real challenge, but it's great to have content designers who are like in the middle of making the product to inform those things.
Next question is, I'm not sure it's somebody with two names in their title. It's probably a shared account, but they're asking, I'm curious about the org structure. Is the content team that creates like help articles and FAQs a part of the design team or a separate team? Like how integrated are the content and other teams?
For Compass, for Intuit, those are customer success or help teams or customer service teams, and they are separate from the product team. But different organizations place the help content people differently, and those are just two examples that I can think of.
Well, did anybody else?
Yeah, we have at Microsoft, we have technical writers who work on the documentation for different products, and it's separate from the content designers who are embedded at the product level on product teams.
Yeah, it's very similar, Condé Nast. I do want to flag though, the startup I was at before I joined Condé, we were kind of doing both. as content managers. So we were writing those concurrently with helping design the new pages. And it was actually a very useful perspective to take, especially if you're working in a startup environment where it's limited development. So maybe speaking to those people could be useful while we're doing our work.
Yeah, here's a question about how have you worked to democratize content design so that more people can get involved and engaged with using and maturing the system?
Yeah, I think that goes back to just getting lots of feedback, opening things up to feedback, and sharing widely with a lot of different stakeholders, and leaving things open for comment. I every time I present our design system and our content guidelines to new designers at Microsoft, I always tell them, please leave comments on anything that doesn't feel clear to you or anything that you think is missing, and we'll look at how to evolve that guidance, or if there are any gaps that we need to fill, because I mean, design is never done. It's an evolving thing. So and making sure that people know that they have ownership over it too. It's not just a team of people who own the thing. It's everyone who's using it. They can also contribute to it.
When I worked with Intuit and we developed the content design style guide for all of Intuit, we just reached out to every content creator that we could find all over the place. The people who were working on the development site, the people who were working on help content, and we let them know that we were, creating something that was for their use as well as product and marketing. And everyone got to play. Everyone had a chance to inform some of those decisions. So it is a very democratic practice to just throw open the doors to say, yes, and everything you say, we will listen to. But ultimately, we distill all of that through some process and some ongoing communication into some guidelines that we feel is publishable and we can move forward with.
Cool. This next one has to do with scaling, which, kind of a nod to Natalie maybe, but the question is about, as you scale from a solo or a small practice to a larger team, how do you decide what to keep within your scope and what to let go of? I imagine it's hard to shift from a hands-on, do-it-all role to one that's more about oversight and guidance. So how do you scale this stuff?
Natalie, do you want to answer this question?
Natalie, do I need to unmute you? I may need to do that. Sorry.
She said something about setting limits that sounded like something we need to hear again.
Hello. Yes, I'm still here. Like I said at the top of our time together, I haven't gotten as involved with design systems, but I know that at some point I will. But I think from the standpoint of when I was talking earlier about boundaries, somebody just put in the chat. Think of boundaries. Don't think of boundaries as keeping things or people out. Think of it as defining what happens within a space or within a practice, and what helps, what is appropriate to happen in that space, right? So, and it'll depend on if your agency, it'll depend on if you're in-house, what verticals you're in, what is the demand for your content strategy or design practice, and maybe you're scaling outward, so you're maybe your bench is getting a little deeper in the skills that each person excels in. I am very much user interviews, research, all the, you might be able to tell, touchy-feely relationship stuff. I love being as close to the user as possible. I am not necessarily the best at the back end stuff where you're starting to talk about URLs and yes, models and systems and that kind of thing fascinate me, but that's not my area of passion or expertise as a content practitioner. So I think it's a couple of things. It's knowing what you're passionate about and what you can realistically do without burning out. And it's also about continually defining what happens in your practice space. It may have to shift from time to time, but I think, I don't know if this example actually made it into the book or not, but I think I wrote something like, just because you can have dinner in your room, in your space, your sleep space, doesn't mean you should. So if people are coming to your content practitioners and asking for things that can better be handled more efficiently by another cross-functional teammate, maybe it's time to have that conversation, right? So you're continually defining what it is that helps you to add value as a practice or a practitioner. And then as you do that, you're protecting your time and making sure that you're being the most efficient and you're not burning out and you're not trying to do all the things. I hope that answered the question.
And did any of the other panelists want to chime in? And I know we're at time, and I know Paula, should we wrap up at this point? And
that seems like a wonderful note to end on, unless, Michael, if you wanted to add anything else, but I think I wanted to, first of all, thank our panelists, most of whom are East Coast based, so they are staying up late to join us tonight. And Michael HV did not mention it, but he's actually on vacation today, so he's even more heroic to show up for us tonight. So thank you, everyone. I'm going to just real quick throw up a screen here again with, I hope this is what's actually showing. Are you seeing the connect with us screen?
Yes.
Okay.
Yep.
Sorry. This is the challenge of having multiple monitors. Just a reminder that we'd love in any or all of our channels, and we'd love to see you back at any of our other events. If you entered the drawing, we will select winners for those. Probably tomorrow, and let the people let you know if you won the ticket to LoveCon or a copy of Natalie's book or the Condé Nast gift certificate. But also a reminder that we do have, if you didn't win Natalie's book, that we have a promotional code for that, and I believe it's CS. So just CSS meetup, I believe. Is that right, Larry?
Yeah.
Michael.
Yeah. Oh, and Michael just. Yeah. I'm sorry.
Anyway, if you go to Rosenfeld Media and use CSS Meetup as the promo code, you'll get a discount on that.
I'll drop that in once more too.
So everybody buy her book, please. Again, thank you, everyone. Obviously, a conversation that could have gone on for hours, but we want to be respectful of everyone's time and let them get on with their evening. So thanks very much, and good night, everyone.
Good night. Oh, and I just want to, one very last thing. I'll keep the Zoom open for just another minute. I'm going to drop the link to join our Slack one more time, because this is the first time we didn't get, there were many questions unanswered. And so happy to continue the conversation in Slack. So feel free to join the Slack, and I'll try to drop the unanswered questions in there and ask the panelists if they can, or if they just want to chime in and help out each other. So thanks, everyone.
Thanks for that.